The financial services sector has a key role to play in allowing agriculture to contribute to economic growth and poverty reduction. A rapidly evolving technological landscape is opening new possibilities to target and price credit, to share risk, and to harness financial technology to expand agricultural productivity and minimize the gap in go-to-market strategies in agri-industry. India's agri-fintech startups have been playing a key role in bridging this gap. With financial inclusions most crucial for this sector, rural fintech is also expected to become a major investment theme within agritech space. On our next session that focuses on discussing how fintech can fill the gap in agri-finance is moderated by Mohammad Atish Khan, co-founder and director, NatureDots, who is joined by Prasanna Rao, co-founder and chief executive officer, Arya, Lieutenant Colonel retired Monish Ahuja, managing director, Punjab Renewable Energy Systems Private Limited. Shri Shaji KV, deputy managing director, NABARD, was supposed to join session but could not make it due to unavoidable circumstances. Nevertheless, we have an exciting session ahead of us.
How we are using technology and other components of this whole chain of products offering a totally new bag of products which can address a lot of gaps, which can address a lot of problems in the agri-finance sector. As we all know that in 2020 about $300 billion have been mobilized in the agri-finance sector. However, only a limited amount is able to reach to the small and marginal farmers. That is one of the reasons, and which is now increasing the reach through technology, because our understanding of risks has been improving. Our understanding of different sectors which deal apart from agriculture directly as a production unit, but also in the allied part, in overall value chain. The diversification of product offering also, I would say, during in these uncertain times, the agility, how quickly the products are changing, products are getting customized to address the need of different players in the whole value chain, that is really astonishing to see. And in this, I would like to start discussion on how we can diversify risk in the using the fintech, and how we can reach or enhancing this whole value chain of products offering, not only the diversity of products, but also how we can present or the present scenarios to different actors in the value chain.
Oh, wonderful. I think, yeah, good afternoon and thanks so much for having me here. What fintech really brings into the agriculture finance sector is more visibility and greater access by managing risk better. And I think that is exactly where it solves this age-old problem of limited access to customers who have been on the fringes of inclusion. And I think that's where the role of ag fintech comes in. If you see historically, and not so long ago, agri-finance was always considered to be a mandated sector. Because banks had to meet a priority sector lending target, banks would have specific programs in order to meet those targets, and that's how it was manifested in their strategies, in their programs and different products that they rolled out. What fintech, and more importantly, I would start with the technology itself, has done is to democratize finance in a more market-oriented manner. I think that's where fintech has played an important role. Today we talk about new age players, we talk about startups, we talk about even older banks talking about agri-finance being a profitable business, which is market-oriented. I think that's the greatest change that has happened because of the inclusion of technology in the field of agri-finance. And as technology's role has improved, one has seen better risk management, and because of that process, you see more number of players coming into this area. And that's the opportunity that technology and fintech has really opened up. We ourselves are an agri-fintech and agritech company, facilitating finance of more than 3,500 crores annually in the post-harvest agriculture sector. And we've seen this pace greatly enhanced in the last few years since the coming up of more technologies that have enabled these newer processes.
Great. Thank you, Prasanna. I would request Lieutenant Colonel Monish to share his view and experience on this particular question.
Sure. So thanks. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for inviting me here. You know, it's all about a problem statement and using technology as an enabler for a solution, right? So what Prasanna talked about was a problem statement of producing more and finding a market for it. I think what we do is uniquely what nobody does is what's left in the fields, which has no economic value for a farmer, which the farmer now, because of the modern harvesting practices, burns in the fields. And we see cities, towns, villages, countries all going black. I think where we work is utilizing this agricultural residue for aggregating it, creating warehousing and storage, and taking it in a forward value chain for energy utilization. And the conversion of energy is multifold. So you could produce electricity out of it, you could do various biofuels out of it, you replace thermal purpose, coal, furnace oil, industrial usage. Now when you look at the magnitude to be managed, and when we talk about government estimate numbers of 500 million metric tons of agri waste being burnt in the fields across India, and if this has to be managed in a scale, you need tech, you need fintech, you need agri-tech, and you need financial inclusion coming in the space as well. So again, you need technology. What technology also enables uniquely is generation and capturing of data, being able to mine the data to use it, and then create products around it. So, you know, when sitting in my office in Bombay, if I have to manage an ecosystem out of 13, 14 states, it is not possible to do it without getting into the technology play of it. And I think we are in very fortunate times where the technologies are fast emerging, adapting to solutions or problem statements which we could find. So you look at AI, you look at BI, you look at engaging with the farmer, you look at engaging with the value chain, and bringing the stakeholders, so equity investors, debt financiers, working capital financiers, all of them on common platforms can source data which is required. So I think there was a revolution of ERP systems for businesses to get managed, and those were traditional businesses where industrialization happened. And now it is about managing the entire ecosystem of agriculture, finance around it, with technology coming in. So we are at interesting times. We find ourselves doubling, tripling on a business top lines, utilizing fintech. And I think sky's the limit for many more such opportunities for startups to get into.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point, because in our startup, we are working basically addressing the aquaculture sector, and understanding and data is very important, because when we started working 2 years ago, there has been huge gap. Hardly any data is there, a reliable data which you can get a sense, and that is a problem statement we start working, bringing more AI, bringing more hard tech into it so that we can understand the resource, and that not only give a sense of how we can understand the resource, but also how we can link it with the climate variability, because these are natural resources, either it's agriculture or aquaculture or even livestock. And all these cross-cutting, whether it's a post-harvest, during harvest, or even pre, all those interventions. So on this particular line, I would request Mr. Prasanna to share his experience about how other startups or this whole ecosystem, it's supporting and addressing different problem statements, solution, and how you see in last 7-8 years this sector is evolving and changing, and where you see it will be in next 5 years.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting to see how the entire ag-fintech sector is evolving. And if you see, the way I would really break this would be into the life cycle of finance in the agriculture sector. So if you were to begin with the farmer and the production side of finance, today for whatever it is worth, a large portion of farmer finance has been concentrated on the pre-harvest side through the it's estimated that it's about 90% of all finance which is directed to farmers is in the form of crop loans, mostly given under the Kisan credit card scheme of different banks. Now, if you were to also dig a little deeper, while this is one data point, the other data point also is that only about 30% of the total agriculture households borrow from formal sources. So there is a certain gap. 90% of all bank loans to farmers goes towards pre-harvest loans in the form of crop loans, and only 30% of all farming households borrow from formal sources. So there is this huge gap that exists here. Now, today what we are seeing happening is new age startups coming in to be able to create more visibility and monitoring occurrences for banks to be able to reach these excluded households. So the ability to digitize farms, for example, or the ability to monitor the end use of loans that are being given to farmers there. So I would really start from some of these areas itself. Today, the moment we move from when you look at a banker's mind and wear a banker's hat, a lender's hat, the first part is to look at the borrower himself or herself. But the ability to isolate the borrower and concentrate on a particular transaction makes finance more efficient. I think that is what fintech has been able to do, and that's where we see a lot of startups, a lot of players in this ecosystem providing different kinds of services. So whether the crop was actually planted, whether the stage of growth in line with the entire agriculture cycle, has it been appropriate or not, and on that basis the bank extending another loan. Now these are kind of things which are possible using, say, satellite imaging or remote sensing. Now these are things which are happening by or is being made possible by various startups in that ecosystem. Similarly, when you move from there to, say, input financing, that's the other leg where we see farmers really needing finance. And with the incorporation of almost about 10,000 farmer producer organizations, which also work towards empowering their farmer members to be able to negotiate better, both on the input side as well as on the output side. We see technology being of great use when it comes to financing of inputs for these FPOs and also for individual farmer members. So that's the other area where we see specific interventions happening within the overall ecosystem. Post that, if you look at the post-harvest finance space, that's one area where we do not have a lot of products to address the need of farmers there. One of the products that my own startup works on is warehouse receipt financing, to enable financing of farmers on the basis of whatever is available with them in their here and now, without really getting into whether they can offer other collateral or do they have any other document to sort of substantiate their credibility. And there we've seen specific innovations being available, right from making storage spaces available without the brick and mortar constructions, using IoT to be able to assess the quality of the produce while it is stored at the farm gate, or offering finance by using that collateral alone and without any other intervention, just by using the Aadhaar number of the borrower. Now, these are innovations that have enabled greater access to both lenders when they reach the borrowers, and similarly for borrowers to be able to access the lenders as they sort of express their needs of finance. And in terms of how we see this evolve, I really think that it is just probably blurring the boundaries of what formal finance really meant to the agri ecosystem. And in the next 5 years, my personal feeling is that you would probably find this number of formal finance reaching only about 30% of the households to at least more than double. And that's where the entire intervention of Agri-Fintech is what my personal thought would be.
Great. I think that's clear indication of how much volume and disaggregation is there in the sector. And on the same line, Colonel Manish, as you have mentioned about aggregation, and which I also feel that as the more aggregators, more aggregation is started happening in the agri sector, do you see that is it more big tickets fintech areas we are entering, or the small ticket fintech areas are equally good considering all risks and transactional costs?
So, good question, and it's very difficult to make choices upfront. The market determines what is sustainable to stay for the long term. So, you would have many small ticket fintech companies coming on board, setting out models, thinking differently, rolling out products. But finally, companies or products which are sustainable for the long run would survive. And these are the ones, as businesses grow and transition, would be the ones which would be actually transitioning into the big ticket fintech companies. So you won't have a start to be big, but you would have typically a start to be small and growing big. So mergers and acquisitions and companies coming on board, certain fintech solutions which have got kind of built by some startup companies which find merit for the larger players would get acquired, and the promulgation would increase. It's also about, India being such a vast and diverse country, it's also about regional dynamics of products. You don't have the similar products around different geographical areas, so you'll have to customize as well. I think that's also something which is required. The push for agri-finance through a fintech platform is, I think, the last decade or so. That's where it's actually started coming up, because the push by regulators and policymakers for agriculture sector finance, wherein it is something which was to be done not for profit basis, is actually converting into, yes, this also makes money because of the scale involved. So both would go hand in hand till a point of time consolidation start happening. Some couple of years or couple of decades actually where we would see that happening. The better part would be the larger fintech companies, the Googles and Microsofts of the world. If they enter this space, then you could see the reverse kind of thing happening where the large companies are there.
Thank you. One of the things which I experience in this sector, and I really feel as one of the most challenging question, is that it's agritech whole space is providing understanding of risks to the farmers, who is the producer. But is fintech enables also the farmers to understand their risk, or fintech is basically in the present scenario is enabling only the finance provider and protecting the finance provider's finance to reach to those vulnerables and risky investments. Like, is this mismatch or is this match? How you see fintech's role in this?
So Atish, I'd like to take that to give you a specific product which we have launched in the last 6 months, along with formal banking finance. So, traditionally formal banking finance has still been available either pre-cropping or during the growth phase or for the sales side of the product. Now, we have looked at the agriculture residue as to be made a commodity. It's not still an existing commodity. And how do you find finance there? Because there isn't any finance there. And I think that's where we could impress upon the formal banking channels to say, if you can fund a farmer for the waste, and we as a company or companies akin to us who are able to take that as a product, then there is a synergetic, symbiotic relationship we can form for creating a market for this agriculture waste. And that's where banks came forward, State Bank of India, HDFC Bank, wherein the KYC for the farmers were done by us because we are the direct link with them. And banks have lent to the farmers directly based on KYC done by us. And thereafter, the product or the waste has been received by us as a product. And in a repayment cycle, because we are going to utilize it or our clients are going to utilize it, the monies have come back to the banking system. So getting this rolled out and then putting it on a fintech platform, the scale is enormous. You can now roll it out pan-India. You can roll it out across geographies. So I think that's something which brings that fun of scale around being able to utilize formal capital in this sector.
Absolutely right, and I can't agree more on the suggestions and points made by speakers. One area which has been cutting across, and being in that industry, one of the area which we always address is around climate variability and those risks, which comes either we call it a weather risk or risk because it's a natural system. Is fintech mature enough to handle these risks as of now, or how would you see it's progressing as we have better understanding of data, we have better gathering of big data, we are using AI to understand and investigate all those problems?
Yeah, no, I think and that's one of the key contributions that we've seen from tech companies. What fintechs have been able to do is to capture that information effectively and build these as an input into different decisioning mechanisms that fintechs have been able to build, and that's where the core kind of contribution or intervention has been from fintechs. For example, say today in my own startup, we operate almost about 2,500 different warehouses across the country. And the total volume of product produce which is stored in these warehouses are about 10,000 odd crores. Now, what it means for us when we sort of manage this business is that if subsequently or in the forthcoming season, say we have weather risks which ensure or which sort of curtail the amount of harvest that would happen, would have an impact on the kind of occupancies that we would see in our warehouses, and which would then have an impact on what kind of embedded loans of finance we could offer to the farmers and the various other players in that ecosystem. Now, technology today enables us to capture this information of how rainfall has been moving or monsoons have been moving. It has also helped us create an insurance product with one of the leading global insurers to offer an insurance product to manage our warehouse occupancy risk. I think it is this synergistic relationship between how technology enabled data capturing and data collection is used by fintechs to be able to manage their own risks. And that is where we see a significant synergy between how other players in the ecosystem work and what can be borrowed by fintechs through different mechanisms to be able to capture that and strengthen their own decision engines.
Okay, great, thank you. So, Colonel Manish, as a final question, I would say, how you see where are still we have gaps, and you can share about your experience where you see more startups or more products would come in future.
So, I think the ecosystem now, the way government has realized, private sector, VC, private equity funding has realized that here is a sector where the gaps exist and hence the opportunity exists. If it was a mature market, then the opportunity would not be there for new players to come in. So if you're able to identify the gaps in the problem statements, it allows for thought process to get tinkered and then solutions to be brought, and thereby getting newer startups or existing companies to look at the sector. I'll take Prasanna's example over here. He said he's into warehousing. FCI is the largest into warehousing in India. But there was opportunity for a private player to come in. Like what we do, we saw opportunity in straw getting burnt in the fields. And we saw opportunity of a linkage to energy as a replacement, and thereby that's where the business started. So you start taking these gaps as opportunities to grow. And I think government mission with the Atal Innovation Mission, AIC centers, private functionaries where startups are being incubated, being guided for various aspects of business plans, capital raise, looking at business in the new paradigm as it is. It is not traditional where you would go and sit in a shop or sit in a factory and produce and end of the day come back. No. Today, sitting in your office, you can rule the world. You can be the largest aggregator of transportation without owning a car. So when these disruptions are seen, you want to be a part of it. And that's where I think today the tier 2, tier 3 cities, which are more closer to the ground, are actually sensing this opportunity of growth. So the gaps are an opportunity. I wouldn't take it as a gap. And I would say that the next couple of decades, you would find many more revolutionary companies coming up to fill these gaps. And there, tech and fintech, agtech, financial inclusion will play a key role.
Thank you so much. I think one thing which I can totally get from this discussion is that we are at a junction that a sector is in next 5 to 10 years is going to increase or bring more avenues in a very exponential manner, whether it's help of fintech, whether it's the direct technologies which are addressing either the better input finance or better input as a whole, or managing overall production, the post-production aggregation, warehouse part. I think as a whole value chain is more opening up. There are more solutions available, and that is a clear sign of a growing sector, and which is fantastic to note. A few of the points which are made by speaker, especially around the further aggregation which this sector might see and has been noticing either at different levels, would not only allow in terms of that unit who is aggregating or a group of people who are aggregating for having better access to finance, having better product offering, having better risk understanding. Data and technology, whether it's big data, whether it's AI, IoT, is helping the sector to understand, diversify, manage its risk, which the fintech companies can totally leverage on, balancing, because the better understanding of risk once a fintech company has can offer better finance, low interest finances, and that is, I think, overall as a sector, I would say we are growing. I just request our speaker to give a concluding remark, and we are good on that.
Sure. I think the way sector of ag-fintech is evolving. It provides a lot of promise, especially in making sure that we are able to include those parts of the society which have hitherto been completely excluded. The entire segment of small and marginal farmers, the segment of the landless laborers and the tenant farmers, those are segments which have traditionally been extremely difficult to reach in the realm of formal finance. And that's where we see the opportunity opening up for new age startups to come in and facilitate, not only through their own balance sheets and through their own books, but acting as channels for larger financial institutions to get there. I think that's the opportunity that ag-fintech really opens up for this particular space. And I truly believe that exciting days are ahead, and we would certainly see more innovations coming in our way to make that possible.
Thank you, Prasanna. Colonel Monish?
Yeah, so, the ideas need to keep flowing. That's one thing which I would want to see, and it should happen. And I think good sound ideas would find meritorious partners, stakeholders, capital coming into the activity. So I'll again draw out an example. Most of us in our company, we come to business from an army background or a defense background. None of us have studied business. None of us have studied finance. But from the realms, when you see it from across the fence, we are successful businesses, we have raised capital, we've got formal capital coming into the picture. And it's all about an idea getting mooted, you living that idea, rolling it out, making the mistakes, and then getting that fintech, agtech ecosystem into being. And you learn on the roll, right? You learn on the job, because none of us have studied these in the MBA classes. So taking that as look at inspirations for opportunities like we have done, and also study the failures, because you don't need to repeat them again, right? You can study hundreds of startups which have failed for various reasons to be a springboard to kind of relook at that problem statement in a different manner. So exciting times, one of the best times for agtech and fintech, at least in my lifetime of what I've seen in the last decade or so. And it will continue to grow by leaps and bounds in the next few years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
5 मिनट में अकाउंट सेटअप और ट्रेडिंग शुरू। हाँ कर सकते हैं। नहीं कर सकते। लगी शर्त और हारा तो It's possible with CoinSwitch Kuber. Download करो और Bitcoin trading start करो. CoinSwitch Kuber. सिक्का चमकेगा.
Cryptocurrency is an unregulated digital asset, not a legal tender and subject to market risks and price fluctuation risks.
Where there is life, there is hope, there is meaning. But life has its downs as much as its ups. Life is about challenges. Life is about opportunities. Time for joy, time for celebration, and time to introspect. Thankfully, in every one of life's moments, and even beyond life itself, there's LIC. Where there is life, there's always LIC. Zindagi ke saath bhi, zindagi ke baad bhi.